let's get into the third quadrant of emotional intelligence. So the third quadrant is about other awareness. Other awareness. And this is really interesting because we're making a shift. Like, look at the first two quadrants, right? The first two quadrants are about yourself, self-awareness, self-regulation. But we're taking a shift now. We're moving into the space of other people. And this is really powerful. And I have to say that, this takes some time. Like, this whole process of becoming competent in emotional intelligence and developing mastery, it does take time. Like any other skill set, you're going to have a rudimentary ability, and then you're going to advance it. You'll get into competency, and then you'll get a feel for it, and then you can gain some mastery. What I'm trying to give you in this video series is to understand the connection between these two books, right? Emotional intelligence as a concept, emotional intelligence as a machinery, and the leadership space as like sort of like an instruction manual of like how to explore and use the machinery. That's what I'm trying to do here, is to connect some pieces so you can really use this stuff in your life and be successful with it. So, other awareness. How do we get into this? What is this about? How do we do it? Think about that for a second. What does it mean to be other aware? Like, compare and contrast that with self-awareness. In self-awareness, we learned that you're basically able to observe your own psychology in action, your own psychology in motion. That's what self-awareness is. You're able to observe your own emotions. You're able to observe your own reactions, your own what's happening inside of you. With other awareness, you're really doing the same thing for other people. It's like if you can imagine that you have this X-ray machine and you can shine an X-ray down into your, subterranean experience, right? And then now you can shine that light or that tool onto others, and you can see what's happening beneath the surface for someone else. What's happening behind their eyes, behind their face, behind their skin. That's the realm I want you to get into. And you might ask, okay, like, how do I do that? Like, that's a cool idea, but how do I do it? I want you to consider the power of attention and the role of listening in this experience of getting into the space of other people, being other aware. So let's take a look at this for a second, right? The power of listening and the role of attention. Excuse me. Excuse me. Take a look at this. Like, how does listening really work? And what is usually happening when you're listening, right? And how does your attention work? And what is your attention usually on? This is the key to being able to be other aware. Consider this. When you're talking with someone, I know for myself, especially if I'm in a rush or if I'm busy or if I've got to get a job done, like when I'm listening to someone, right? Think about for yourself. When you're listening to someone, what are you listening for, right? What are you listening for? I think a lot of times I'm listening for information, right? Like if I'm doing some work for someone, I'm listening for the information I need to be able to fulfill on the job. Or what if I'm doing problem solving? I'm listening for what is the problem so I can bring the solution, right? Like think about for yourself, when you're listening to people, what are you listening for? Most of the time we listen for information, right? We don't listen for the other person's experience. We don't listen for the other person's emotional state. We don't listen for what's happening in the background for the other person because it seems not relevant to the interaction. Like what seems relevant is whatever information I need to get so that I can fulfill my job or my duty, then that's what's happening. So what can we learn from that? We can learn that if we expand what we're listening for, then we can gain access into other people's experience. Let me give you a little bit more, right? If you start to listen empathically, let's just call this empathic listening, right? Then you're not listening for information. You're listening for the other person's emotional experience, right? So when you're having a conversation with someone, consider when I'm listening to them, okay, I get the information that's coming through their words, right? But what are they saying but they're not using words? Like, think about the tone of voice someone has. Think about the nonverbal expression, the facial expression, the body language, right? Think about the mood or the energy that someone's putting off. And this is what's so cool. And I promise you, you have this ability because you're human. All human beings have the power and the ability to sense the emotional states of other people. You have seen this, if you've seen some of my other videos, you've seen that I talk about something called limbic resonance. I think it's chapter 7. And limbic resonance is the idea, it's a scientific principle, that our limbic brains, our emotional brains, are connected in like a limbic loop, that we resonate with each other. We can sense the moods of other people. How many times have you been out with a buddy, or maybe your friend gets to the restaurant a little late and they put their keys down and they start talking and you can just sense something's wrong. You go, what's wrong? And they go, oh, nothing. No, what is it? You know it because you sense it, because you're human. You have that natural ability. And we tend to listen a little deeper with our friends because the relationship is deeper. The purpose of the interaction is to have a good time, to, share life with each other. So we're expanding our listening beyond information, which is common in business. In business, we're just listening usually for information because that's the purpose of the relationship, right? So if you broaden the purpose of your listening and you expand what you're listening for to include not just information, but also deeper layers, you're going to naturally become more other aware. Does it make sense? It's a really powerful skill. And so like everything else, the more you practice the skill, the more it becomes natural. Okay? Now, let me give you something else. This is really cool, right? And a lot of this, I learned this from really powerful coaches, and really powerful teachers of self-development. So again, I'm sharing the best of what I've collected over the years, and that's a lot of what's synthesized in this book and in my other videos. That's where it's coming from, a lot of this stuff. So let me share a little bit more about this point of attention. When you're listening to someone, when you're interacting with them, think about where your attention is. Usually our attention is on ourselves, right? Like, what do I need to get across? What do I need to get out of this? What am I doing next? What is happening for me, right? It's just totally natural. So consider when you step into contribution, right? Remember the 3 C's of the leadership space, right? The 3 C's of the leadership space. This is so fundamental to practicing leadership space. 3 C's: choice, context, contribution. When you put yourself into a contribution mindset, you want to see what's happening for the other person. You want to get into that other person's space because that's where the contribution can happen, and that's where a lot of value can be exchanged, which makes people want to interact with you, makes people want to follow you, makes other people appreciate your leadership. Contribution consciousness is such a powerful factor all the time in practicing the leadership space, and it matters here. If you put your attention on how can I be a contribution to this person, you're naturally going to put your attention over there with them. Remember, contribution mindset is shifting from ego to others. So when you shift into contribution, your attention is not on yourself, it's on them. And that allows you to pay attention to their experience more. And I'll give you one final thought, and this is really powerful. When we listen, right, we can listen with our ears, we can listen with our brain, we can listen with our heart, right, to the emotions. We can also listen with our body. And that sounds like kind of weird. It's, what do you mean listen with your body? But it's really true, right? We can listen with our whole being. And there's this whole branch of therapy called, I think it's called equestrian therapy or something like that, where people will actually interact with horses. This is true. People interact with horses because horses are so sensitive. They're such emotional beings. They're so powerful that you can kind of retune yourself by getting in connection with the vibration of a horse. And it sounds kind of crazy, but it's really true. I met someone at a conference one time, then she had, she was an equestrian therapist. That's how I learned about it. I thought it was really interesting. A horse is very sensitive to emotion and they kind of feel with their whole body. Well, consider when you're listening to someone, if you were to pull back a little bit and not listen with your ears and listen with your heart, but then pull back a little deeper and actually try to pay attention to the sensations you're getting in your body from what they're saying, then you're really experiencing what they're experiencing physically and emotionally and psychologically. And that's because you're actually connecting with them at a deeper, richer level because you're trying to get their whole experience. You're listening to the subconscious experience of the other person, right? And I get that this is a lot. It's like, whoa, this is getting pretty deep, but this is what it takes. Our natural tendency is to be about me. So we want to shift to a new natural tendency, which is to be about them or to be about you, right? So how do we get into other awareness? We practice these types of tools. when we practice shifting our attention into the other person's world, get into their world, get into their experience, listen to their whole communication, listen with your body, listen for their entire experience, and that's naturally going to get you over there with them. And again, it's a skill. After you practice for a while, you'll start to be more natural with it, and you'll naturally see, whoa, it's like so easy for me to understand people. You'll pick up what's going on for people so much more easily, and that gives you the ability then to eventually step into the fourth quadrant, which is other influence.